Welcome to the Steve and Caleb Show. My name is Caleb.
And my name is Steve. Here we like to talk about politics and current events from a perspective of liberty.
Oftentimes our opinions make both Republicans and Democrats uncomfortable.
Let's dive in.
All right, we are live and with a packed episode. So I'd like to start with the big news that happened yesterday. President Trump signed an executive order that some irresponsible media outlets are calling a tax cut, rental payment waiver, and unemployment bonus. Have you heard much about that?
I really haven't. I kind of saw like the headline, but I didn't really dig into it at all. Probably because I see tax cut, as you mentioned, and I'm like, sweet, and then I move on.
Right. So as for myself, and I'm sure you too, I'm always going to be against executive orders just as a whole. I vote for my House and Senate representation to be used accordingly.
Right.
And now, listeners may be going straight to, well, they weren't working, so Trump had to do it for them. Mm-hmm. This is just a matter of political morality, if that even does exist. I believe a president should
like
almost
military intelligence, kind of oxymoron.
I believe a president should almost never use executive orders unless we are at an extreme crisis. Mm-hmm. Right now, I think we can all agree Corona is bad, but we're not at an extreme crisis, at least not
like back in March or like April, you could make an argument because everything was so new. You can make an argument for it as far as like...
that's the whole point of an executive order. Is if something happens right now, you need a decision maker right now.
Yeah.
You don't have that day to call a special... what do they call it? It's where he just calls a special meeting for the House and the Senate. Okay,
then they vote. Like the lead people.
Right. Okay, so and if our representation doesn't show up to work, we vote them out. That's just my thinking.
That's how it should be.
Right, not just do executive orders every time they don't show up. And if they don't show up, we hypothetically vote them out and put in people who will. We literally have the most perfect government to date, but we don't use it properly.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I think we are the only country that where the people truly are the government. Mm-hmm. Because how it's supposed to work is you, Steve, vote in a representative to vote in favor of you.
Right.
Hypothetically.
Yeah. I'm gonna vote for the guy who best represents my interests politically.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Okay. So, frankly, the voters don't care about that because they'd rather see these headlines with the executive orders. Now that's just my own opinion, and regardless of my own opinion on executive orders, here's what actually happened yesterday. So Trump announced on Twitter on August 6th that he was having an executive order written up to have tax cuts, his words, eviction protections, his words, unemployment extensions, his words, and student loan repayment options, also his word. Okay, so fast forward to yesterday, August 8th, he signed 4 executive actions. So I'm going to list them, and then we can talk about it after I list them. So the first one is $400 extra for unemployment payments, as opposed to the $600 that it was. So the federal government is actually only going to pay $300 of that $400, and then the additional $100 is going to be paid for by the states.
And this is like the little add-on for the unemployment bonus for people who are out of work due to the Rona. Gotcha. Due
to being laid off, or if you are sick and have to, what's the word they're using? Quarantine.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the second one is assistance to homeowners and renters. So this action is just an encouragement that federal efforts are to help homeowners and renters avoid getting kicked out of their homes for not paying bills. Mm-hmm. That's pretty self-explanatory. That means there is not even really an answer yet, though, because it's just an encouragement. There is no...
like a law or regulation.
Right.
Which the president can't pass laws. He's supposed to execute law.
Correct.
Which is the executive branch.
Exactly.
Funny how that works.
Right. So it's not a ban on evictions. Mm-hmm. It's just an encouragement. So I would suggest you guys read these for yourself. Go to the White House website. And then the third one is a payroll tax holiday. So this one could suck. And I know you're thinking, for whoever's listening, you guys are libertarians. You're supposed to be for tax holidays. You don't want taxes. And you're right. But I need you to look up the definition, defer, because it is not a tax cut like all these media outlets are putting out. This is actually one of the few things that the left media is actually reporting on accurately. Mm-hmm. They're like, no, he said defer, not cut. Look at him. See.
Look at the text.
It's like the one thing they're actually doing right for once in a while. But anyways, for those of you who don't look it up, it means to pay back or to put off to a later date.
in reference to like a tax deferment.
Yeah, so
it doesn't mean don't worry about it. It means don't worry about it today.
Today.
Just get me when you got it later.
Right. So deferment, the actual definition means to put off.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. This applies to people who make less than $104,000 a year.
Which is like most people.
Yeah, it probably is most people. Now, a lot of media outlets, Fox News was one of them. I don't remember the others, but they were saying it's 100,000, but it's actually 104,000 if you do the math. Like I said earlier, go to the White House website, look at the executive order yourself. It clearly says less than $4,000 biweekly, which comes out to $104,000 a year. Okay, so, and I believe I read in the executive order that he encourages the Treasury Secretary to seek an alternative way to pay it back, to like pay the deferment back. Mm-hmm. But again, it's not a law.
Right.
It's an encouragement. Yeah. Okay. But that kind of seems hopeful at best. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean.
So let me.
I have a fourth one. Sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
And last, an extension for student loan relief. This one is just kind of self-explanatory. It said to suspend federal student loan payments and sets interest rates to zero until the end of December. This means student loan payments are deferred. Again, look it up until December 31st. So interest is canceled. That's done.
That's good.
What is it? The Board of Education. What is it? The Education Department. Whatever they're called.
DOE. Yeah.
They have the authorization to. They have the ability to authorize these payment cuts and whatever. But anyways, back to what you were going to say about the.
So going to the was it income tax you said?
Yes.
Okay, so to me that one thing that always drives me nuts about you know what really grinds my gears is when people refer to a tax cut as a like it's a payment almost as though you're taking money from so if I don't pay this much in taxes. So the example I see all the time is people say the fact that churches aren't taxed costs the government X amount each year, right?
Okay, yeah.
But or it doesn't have to be church, but any
organization,
I know
what you're talking about, yeah.
You know, whether it's a corporate tax cut or whatever. My view on it on any tax cut is you can't say that is a cost. So the way that this sounds is they're looking to get it paid back as though they're paying us money.
Right.
They're doing us a favor by not taking my money or our money.
Was it you? Do you have a friend that worked for the IRS?
I know.
Maybe it was my dad. It was somebody I talked to recently. They knew somebody who worked for the IRS, and then they since quit. I forget who it was, but I'm just gonna butcher this and continue on with what you were saying. So this person who worked for the IRS told whoever told me this that the way that they're trained to think about when they when they audit, the way they're trained to think about it is every penny that a person makes is the government's money, and we are allowing you to keep X amount.
That's how they're
that's how they're trained to think. So that way they can audit for the maximum amount for the government is 100% is ours. We decide how much you get to keep. That's how the audit is done.
That's insane.
Again, it's all word of mouth, but does that really sound that outlandish?
No, and by their practices, no. And by the simple fact that they're looking for a way to repay, quote unquote, get to bring this revenue back in.
Right.
They're looking at it as though it's their pay. It's like when people talk about the tax cuts that the fact that churches are tax free costs the government this much. It doesn't cost the government that much. You're just not getting that money.
Right.
If I don't go to work, I don't get paid.
That's that thinking.
It's not it's not a cost for me. I just don't get the money because I didn't earn it.
Right.
Granted, the government didn't earn any of my money.
No.
But I do understand there is a function of government. There needs to be a military. There needs to be
roads,
basic infrastructure, that sort of thing. Even though that's the other thing people always say is infrastructure. That's the word they use, but I don't think people know what that means.
No, they don't.
They think like power lines. The federal government doesn't pay for my power lines.
No.
Duke Energy pay for my power lines.
Right.
It's a private company. It's privatized. Now, whether or not that's obviously there's monopolies within areas, but that's also by regulation. So
right.
there's a whole other bag of worms. But anyway, going back to the tax cut thing, quote unquote tax cut. The fact that they're just looking to recoup that money in the first place, like why bother? Just may as well take it now. You know what I mean? That's like, so me, I have part of my retirement, I have a Roth IRA, meaning, so just make the math easy. Let's say I put $100 every paycheck and the government takes, again, make the math easy, 10%. They take it now, and then when I go to collect that money when I retire, they don't get any of it.
Right, you're paying taxes now versus
it's paying pre-tax. So because my thinking is taxes are never going to go down. They're only going to keep going up. So hopefully by the time I go to retire,
unless we elect Rand Paul, but
yeah, is he still alive? But anyway, but that's the way I always look at it. Is I simply don't trust the federal government to be good stewards of my money. But that's crazy if that's true, which based on their actions and how things are treated as far as like taxes go. Yeah, it's not hard to believe. It's not too far fetched.
Right. It's not far fetched to think that they're going to try to recoup that.
Mm-hmm.
Not because we're crazy and trying to like come up with theories and come up with crap to talk about.
Right.
This is coming from history. Mm-hmm. Well, you just got to open a book, get on Google, and you will find out that we're going to have to pay for that.
Yeah, and if not us, our kids are, and that's to me that's even more immoral than. Doing it so I have to pay it later.
So what options are there then? Okay, so you let's just say there's just a straight payback program where we do our taxes on whatever website you do, H&R Block, and they request it then. There would be the option of maybe requesting it throughout the next few years through that method, and our kids would end up with the bill too eventually.
Right.
Or they just print the money and the value of the dollar goes down.
That's more likely what they'll do.
That's probably... Which is still bad.
Yeah, that's
don't get me wrong. I don't
want
to pay through H&R Block when I do my taxes.
I have another solution.
What's your solution?
So, whatever amount of money that the government is not going to take in, budget for it. Don't spend that much.
Oh, dude, yes.
That's what?
Yeah, right.
If I don't have enough money to go see a movie, guess what I'm not going to do? Go see a movie. Right. But the federal government can just go and say, oh, hey, we're not going to get this money, million. I'm sure it's millions of dollars.
Oh, yeah.
As far as these tax quote unquote cuts are, but we're still going to go do the same things we were going to do,
right? As
though we got it, and then they're never going to get it. Like the fact that they're allowed to budget like that to me is absolutely insane. And I think I mentioned it before, but some guy, I think it was a comedian, was saying if he was elected, king for a day, Dave Ramsey would be at gunpoint forced to be the, the guy running the Federal Reserve or whatever, because they need to get on a budget, a real budget. Whenever they submit these budgets, one thing that they always do is they throw these, the fact that they raised the smoking age to 21. That was part of the budget for this.
Yes.
Are you serious?
I totally forgot about
that. What? They can do that? They should not be able to do that.
No.
That should be in the tax code for them not to be able to do that. Tax codes and regulations shouldn't regulate the American people. It should regulate the government.
Yes.
And that's what so many people have gotten away from is in government is they're writing their own rules to be able to operate. It's just insane. I can't do that.
And then people like us who criticize it and then who not just criticize it, but criticize the politicians and then the voters who enable.
Right,
we're kind of the crazy ones, and that doesn't offend me, but it's unsettling. People will be like, "Oh, you libertarians." Mm-hmm. It's like, what do you mean by that? I'm sorry that I'm critical of where my money's going.
Right.
I don't know. I don't know the process. Why am I the crazy one for trying to hold these people accountable?
And these same people, because they're the quote unquote Karens of the world.
Yes.
Karens can be guys, by the way, if you didn't know that. That if they go to a restaurant and their waitress or waiter doesn't smile or isn't friendly, oh, you're not getting a good tip because it's my money I'm spending. Yeah. But then they'll let the elected officials go and completely waste all their tax dollars. When I look at my taxes I pay every year. And then I see how things are operated. I'm like,
it's gross.
It's offensive. It really is.
Yeah.
It makes me. It's probably in the top 5 things that bug me about the way the federal government operates. So even at the state level, it's not as bad at the state level. Indiana is fairly frugal. I think we've been in the black. Right. Our state budget's been in the black.
Holcomb's been spending money lately.
He has been, and then everyone has. Really, the last few months. But that's the thing is what do they call it if you have money for a rainy day? This is a perfect example of a rainy day. If the state of Indiana has a surplus,
yes,
it needs to save it. Why don't governments have savings accounts? Why is that a bad thing?
Right.
Now I get it, you want to use this capital to reinvest into your state or what have you, but that applies to a business too. As a business, it's important you have money saved in case something happens.
Right.
If I'm a mechanic, right? If I own my own garage one day and I have, anyone who's ever been in a mechanic shop or been involved, they know how expensive just tools are. I mean, the Snap-on guy, they call it the rape van. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah,
because it's so expensive for a wrench, Mm-hmm. And so let's say you're working, you have no savings, you're paying your bills and you're spending whatever your profit is, you're reinvesting a little bit into the business, or you're just spending whatever it is, or you don't have savings. And say your car lift goes out. That's not a cheap item. That's not like go down to Harbor Freight and buy one for $100. That's an expensive piece of equipment.
Right.
And if you don't have money saved or put aside to be able to like replace that stuff, it's bad business. But the federal government does it as the normal practice.
Yeah.
That's what they do. It's insane that they're allowed to do that. That people are just either they don't get it, or their things are getting funded. Their stuff is whatever they're like, their big thing is, whatever that is for either side. It's not just, this isn't like all the left spends all the money and the Republicans want to save it. Or it's both sides.
Oh, you want to hear a quote? It's not a quote. It was a meme. And it was Republicans campaign like libertarians, but then they legislate like progressives.
Yeah, they really do.
And it's like, wow, like that's completely true.
Yep.
Because they talk about budgeting and spending. And don't get me wrong, there are guys out there, not many of them, but the two that come to mind, or I guess 3 or 4 that come to mind, is like, the Ted Cruz, Rand Paul.
I was thinking of Ted Cruz. So I think it was that bill, the spending bill that raised the smoking age 21.
Yeah.
It may have been the one prior, I don't remember. But he got up there, and it's like, it's
thick as a book.
6 inches thick. It's a spending bill.
Right.
It's the budget. And he literally like looks at all the other people, and he's like, none of you have read this. I know you haven't, because they just put it out yesterday, and I've only read a part of it, and I've been up all night trying to read this.
Right. I saw a tweet. It was a few years ago, and it was Rand, and he had, because his thing, I don't know if he still does it anymore, but he was going through this kick where he would refuse to pay for hotels and stuff through taxpayer money. If he did it, he'd do it through his own money, whatever. So he was in his office reading through some big bill just like that. I forget what it was. And he had to like order Domino's, and he was sleeping on a cot, and he just had like a flashlight because he was just like reading this bill like from top to bottom. And it's just like, I really wish we had more politicians like that, but we can't have more politicians like that if we don't have voters to enable
Absolutely
that.
Right.
And that's why I think where a lot of our listeners may not agree with everything we say, but I feel like the one thing that and I'm not saying that we're perfect either, but I feel like the one thing that people should take away from this episode specifically, and maybe others, is that, we need to go back to a more
we the people
government.
Yeah. I mean, because like it's too easy to like, I will say we're pretty bad about it. I'll say that's a flaw we have as far as it's too easy to look at a politician and say he's the problem or she's the problem.
It is.
Right. And I mean, one of the examples one of the things that Trump said that I really agreed with about the response to the coronavirus is he's like, hey, governors, run your state.
Yes, that was that was good.
And I'm like, yes, handle this at the lowest possible level. And the fact that he said that, I totally agree with it. But then what does everybody want to do? They want to point at him like this is all his fault. Right? But at the end of the day, everyone that's in office was elected. Of course, there's like, Supreme Court justices, there's appointed positions. Those are kind of different. I tend to not agree with those. But at the same time, there's still a process to get like the Supreme Court justices, approved. When they have to go through the old Kavanaugh thing, was a nightmare.
That was a mess.
But for the most part, they're elected. And I do think that they generally reflect the populations that they come from. The president's probably a little different, because it does seem like it goes left, right, left, right, left, right, most of the time. But even then, like, you can't represent 2 sides of a coin, or 3 sides, if we're, however many sides you want to talk about. You can talk about libertarians, the Green Party, but however many sides with one person, you just can't do it. No, I don't expect it to be.
I do think Rand balances it pretty well, though.
Yeah, I really liked a lot of the things he says. Like talking about sitting with a cot with the flashlight and all that
Dude,
stuff.
I've such I know as libertarians we like, you shouldn't look at politicians like rock stars. Dude, he's a rock star. Like on one end, he'll be like, hey, you guys are spending too much. Hey, we don't need the Patriot Act or spying on people. And then these other Republicans are like, oh, yeah, okay, whatever.
Right.
And then the voters don't care. Yeah. They see an R on the ballot.
Yep.
They vote for it because it's better than a Democrat, which, don't get me wrong, in some cases it might be. But, and I hate to like take this around such a big curve here, but then that also goes to like the Indiana thing we're going through right now. So for those of you who aren't in Indiana, we're all pretty PO'd at our governor for trying. He attempted, and it was just shot down so fast. He tried to do a mask mandate through an executive order, and he still did it. But what made people upset was the what was it? It was the consequences that people didn't like.
Yeah,
it was a class.
It was like a class B misdemeanor.
Yeah, it was a class B, which is a higher misdemeanor than a DUI in Indiana.
Yeah, if it's not higher, it's the same. One way or the other.
Right.
I can't remember exactly how it worked out, but I was like, "Are you serious?"
And the wording was, if you're over 9, you had to wear it, which imply that if you were over 9 and didn't wear it, you could get a misdemeanor as a child.
A 10-year-old could get a misdemeanor, which would probably go to the parent, I assume.
I don't know, maybe. But anyways, for those of you who don't know, it was shot down, or he just took that part out because people are so mad. But people are still going to vote for him even though they are mad.
Yeah, because he has the R next to his name. Yep.
And people will say, well, it's better than the Democrat. Where I would argue that might be true for the most part, but imagine if you're like the Republican Party, like the group of old white dudes in the room, just imagine you're them, or imagine you're a fly on the wall in that room.
This is Indiana. They're definitely old white dudes.
So just picture this, and picture a Democrat winning. And picture that the reason they won was because people didn't vote for Holcomb, because of the mandates, because of the executive orders, because of the over-authoritarian ruling that he's had for so long. That would give them a very hard reset, I think. Yeah. I think that's good. Yeah, we might have an overzealous dictator for a governor, which would be no different than Holcomb. I mean, but I wonder if they would start embracing some of the stuff that like you and I would say. Like less taxes, less government.
That's what Republicans campaign on.
It is what they campaign on, and I don't know. I wonder what it's going to take, if it'll ever happen, for it to happen.
I don't know. Yeah, it's hard telling nowadays. It's just the way everything is done. I was kind of shocked because like when I think we mentioned last time I was here. If you described the things that you and I generally believe, you listed out like those traits, lower taxes, small government, what am I, Republican. And the fact that, for him to have governed the way he has, and like with the Class B misdemeanor, which I respect the fact that he got the feedback from the population.
That's good.
And okay, yeah, this is probably not a wise decision. And the other part was like I know the sheriffs in the counties we live in, both were like, we can't enforce this. Basically, so they had these letters, and I know we both shared them on Facebook, but basically it said, I'm gonna paraphrase the Steve version. If you're a Karen, don't call us if someone's not wearing a mask at Kroger. We don't care. Yeah, we can't enforce it. It's not a law.
Right.
This, and I do know another side of this coin is a lot of state legislators, like within the state, are like, hey, governor, we're supposed to be the ones making laws here. Yeah. Why don't you let us come into session? Why was session not called? That was a big thing that I started to notice all of that.
I'm very upset with, I think my senator is the same as yours, Phil Boots.
Yep.
And then I believe your House representative is the same as mine as well, Sharon Nagel.
That sounds right. Yeah.
Okay, and they have been crickets. And it's just kind of upsetting as well. I don't know if I can't vote for them. Like, how so you're just going to let the governor do that and not say a word?
Right. That's a big deal.
That is a big deal. Yeah. And now let's say they did the mask mandate, which, the mask mandate in of itself really isn't that big of a deal, in my opinion. That may not be your opinion, but in my opinion, it's not that big of a deal if the conclusion was brought about the proper way.
Sure. Yeah.
So let's say all these representatives came together and voted on it, and it just happened. Okay,
yeah, absolutely.
That's that, but
and yeah, exactly. Like my opinion on it would be, well, I don't really like that you're trying to tell me what to do with my personal life, even though it's in public space. You can make all the arguments.
Sure,
but it's a law now. Okay, if I don't
the
like
proper
the law,
channels were used.
Exactly. If I don't like the law, there's proper channels to fight it.
Yes,
right.
Thank you.
And for the record, for those of you listening, Caleb and I both wear masks in public. It's not like we're like, super Karens are on both sides of this coin, right? Where you have the guys. I had a guy like look at me and do like the when I walked by because I was going into a gas station. I had my little
in
face
the gas
cover.
station.
Yeah, I was going in. He was going out.
Oh, okay.
And he gave me he kind of looked at. I was pulling it up as I walked in.
Oh, okay.
And he's like, and walked off. That's a Karen move. And then there's the other side, which is like, there's a viral video where she was like, this lady was screaming at this couple.
She's like, I hope her kids die.
Yeah, I hope your kids die. I was like, what?
Yeah.
Are you serious? Like, what? That's both sides of that coin, But the fact that if they had done it the right way, there's something to be said about that.
Right.
And like what you said, I think we do have one of the best types of governments in history, and it's just not being utilized properly.
Oh yeah.
And we spoke when I got here just before we started recording. I've been rereading the book Brave New World, and if you've not read this book, I'll give you two books you need to read, which is Brave New World, obviously, and then the book 1984 by George Orwell. 1984 is it's almost become one of those like comparing everything to Nazism. Everyone compares things that the government does to 1984. If you've not read either one of those books, you need to read them and then start looking at our society. Because there are a lot of things that our society is doing that are major fixtures in the different societies within these books. So in Brave New World, it is the society, and everything is perfect. Now, everyone's happy, but there's no individualism, and that's the key to happiness in this book is no individualism. Which brings us into our next thing we were going to talk about, by the way. Another major fixture in this society, in this book, Brave New World, is the sexualization of everybody, but including children. They start this at an early age. They encourage what's called erotic play, and there's this game called Find the Zipper that these little kids play. And in the very beginning of the book, there's a scene where like these students are going through this facility. They condition people to only want to do whatever their lot in life is. There's a caste system. There's like, you have like I think it's alphas, and they're like they run everything all the way down to epsilons, and they're like hard laborers.
Okay.
And everyone has like different color clothes, and like upper castes are conditioned to hate like khaki because it's like, oh, that represents these nasty people, right? And it's all conditioned while they're young. One of the scenes was there's these babies on this like floor. And I think they were epsilon babies, if I remember correctly. But they're a lower caste, right? And they have books and flowers in front of these babies. And they're crawling around and cooing and everything. And they crawl up to it. And they're, oh, look, books and flowers. And then they flip a switch on the wall, and it electrifies the floor and shocks the babies. And they turn it off. And then they shock them again when they go back for the books. And they're conditioning them to hate books and flowers. And the reason being is they want them to not want to be into books because that can open their minds up. They need to love their hard labor job. And there's other things they do, and they play these loud music. And as they get older, they start to encourage them to like play with each other sexually. That's a major fixture in this society. Now, obviously, this is a fictional society, right? Right. But the reason the book was written, and the same with 1984, is they're both pointing to things that the authors at the time. That 1984 was written, I believe, in 1954. So 84, I think that was the year. I may be off by a few. I know it was in the 50s, and 1984 for him was like, that was when this stuff's going to happen. So like for us, when we were, it was like Y2K, right? That was like, everything's changing, you know? Yeah. So for him, that was like the year he kind of picked. But
he sort of underestimated, but I mean,
yeah,
he's probably within 100 years of being correct, unfortunately.
But like the Brave New World with the sexualization of kids,
wasn't that one written in like the 20s?
I don't remember actually. I read it in high school, and we went into like the author and when it was written and everything. Right. But I've been rereading it very recently, and
written in 1931.
Yeah.
So
there you go. It takes place in like 2,632 or something like that. It's like
way in the future.
So they replace, another thing that's really funny, by the way, is they replace God with Henry Ford. They say, praise be to our Ford. It's like a little play on words. And like instead of a cross, they took the top of the cross was a T for like the Model T Ford. And like
that makes sense.
The whole thing,
considering the time, you know.
The whole thing the whole thing they are basing it off of was when Henry Ford instituted the assembly line.
Right.
They essentially applied that to every part of life. So assembly line babies, like women don't give birth, they're made in test tubes, and they can get 96 people out of one fertilized egg. It's this whole thing.
See, we went
it's
over
like a Birkanovsky group or something. That's what they call it.
A what?
I don't know. It's part of the book, but yeah. And so it's like everything's mass produced. If your clothes wear out, so okay, I'm going to start listing a few things off. I'm going to think about today's society. If your clothes wear out, you don't fix them. You just replace them and buy new clothes. If everyone belongs to someone else, so if you want to go and have sex with somebody, you just go do it. if you want to go, if you have something that makes you feel bad, just take this pill and make it all feel better. It's called Soma.
Wow.
It's a major theme within the book, and then you just go on and on and on. You start seeing the first opening part of the book, and they start establishing the themes and Soma and the different parts of the book. The religious ceremonies they have, where they go into a table, they go like this round table, and they start passing this cup around, and this cup has that Soma, and it's a drug essentially.
Yeah.
And then they start dancing, and they start turning the lights on. They play this like tribal music, and then they have a big orgy, and they start singing this songs like orgy, porgy, all this stuff. It's insane.
Wow.
And are people having like outright wild open orgies, as part of a religious thing? No, not open. I'm sure they happen, but
You're right.
it's more of like, so the authors aren't saying this is what's going to happen in society exactly. They're not like trying to be a Nicodemus. They're trying to like say this is kind of the mindset that happens when they were both kind of writing against socialism is what they were doing.
It's a slippery slope, and they're trying to
exactly, and they identified it, and basically, I think basically what they did was they used that slippery slope. It's hard to say.
Slippery.
That principle, and said, okay, 50 years from now, what's it look like?
Yeah.
And they just kind of guessed. I think it's kind of how they did it.
Right.
But going back to sexualization of children, I mean, what's one of the biggest? What's not the biggest story as far as like coverage, but like it should be the biggest story of the century is the whole Maxwell files thing being unsealed, right? With all the these supposedly tons of people in high positions, politicians, royalty. I mean, you name it. If they're in some kind of power, they're supposedly, I'm going to say allegedly, for I have reasons I have to say allegedly, brought that they were part of Epstein's pedophilia circle.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of aspects to this that I don't know that I really.
Well, it's like if I hung out with a person and turns out they had a person chained in their basement.
Right.
And I was over at their house multiple times. There would be a reason to have suspicion that maybe,
right.
I
was part of that.
No.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of the Maxwell Epstein thing, I just wanted to bring up, I saw this interesting video on TikTok last night. Okay. And this dude was like, I want to show you something. So he got on his it was like Google Earth, but I think it was a different program. Regardless, he went to Epstein Island. He found it, he went to it, and he's looking at it from a bird's eye view, and he's like, look, this is a pool, that. Right, here's a tennis court, all right? And he's like, now keep your eye on this tennis court. And he, took the bird's eye view and, went down to more like a horizontal view and then went into the tennis court, and it's a mountain painted like a tennis court to look like a tennis court from the bird's eye view.
Really?
Yeah, and I have it saved on my phone, and I'm going to try and put it on our Facebook page. But anyways, it makes the conspiracy theorists and it makes it look not
it's
as
just fodder.
It's just thick.
Yeah,
it's so thick.
It's like 4 C's.
Yeah, dude. It's like, and it's like you said, it should be the biggest story.
Yeah,
ever.
And a friend of mine who kind of has very libertarian leanings, like as I am. He sent me. He's been sending me stuff. We send stuff back and forth because Facebook's deleting this stuff.
Oh,
some of the stuff
left and right.
And they fact check it and stuff like that. And okay, some of this stuff sounds pretty crazy. It sounds very outlandish. But what I said to him in response one time was, if 10% of this stuff, if 1% of this stuff is true, this should be the biggest news story of the century.
Yes.
If 1% of the people of the list of names that we've all seen, if you've been on social media at all and you've seen anything about this,
just one was right.
I'm not going to say any of the names. I have reasons. But if 1% of them is accurate, it should be the biggest story of the century.
Yes.
The fact that that child trafficking, not just sex trafficking, but child trafficking.
Right, because they're used for slavery and other things.
Yeah, I mean,
organ harvesting.
It's insane. Like the fact that, no one thinks it's a good thing. No. Let's just say amongst the general public, but it's just not talked about. And part of the reason that, my opinion is some of the people that are implied in these pedophilia or these child trafficking schemes are people who control major media outlets.
Right.
And it's like, well, no, if you own a company and some news company. So if our podcast, for example, if we had employees, right, and one of them was doing something and I said, Caleb, beats his kids, whatever, that's not something we're probably going to run with.
Sure.
We're probably going to be like, no, I don't beat my kids at the most. But they're not even doing that. They're just not talking about it.
Right. So
they're not allowing it to get the
why I think people aren't talking about it either especially on the left, because this is more of a right side of the spectrum thing, because of the Q and QAnon, it's just kind of like really digging in on this, which is kind of annoying, and I'll explain later. But I think one reason why the right is running with it and the left is not is because most of the people on that list, there are a lot of like celebrities and what does the left call it? Humanitarian. They're the humanitarians that they all look up to for global warming and inspiration and sexualization, inspiration, and all this weird, all the weirdness comes from them. And if they were to be exposed as these horrible pedophiles, then I feel like the left sees that as their politics being kind of torn apart. Right. And so that's why I think the left does not run with it.
That's silly in a way. Not in a way, it just is silly.
It is silly.
So, like, a perfect example is, like, if a priest, and I'm not Catholic, you and I aren't Catholic, if a priest, when they did molest children, that doesn't make, like, my other viewpoints wrong. That doesn't make recycling a bad thing. If Leonardo DiCaprio was fiddling kids, diddling kids, that doesn't mean you shouldn't recycle stuff. Everyone wants to pile everything into a big thing.
Especially... I think that side
does it more.
Right.
I don't even know if I'm just using his name because I always think, when I think of celebrity environmental, I think him.
Oh,
I don't know if he's been implied in any of that.
Actually, there was an article that came out recently about how he dates young girls and how he's like abusing power by doing that.
Really?
Yeah, I guess he's been caught. I mean, I don't really think it's that bad. Because, he's...
When you say young girls, you mean like he's like 40 21. And they're like 20. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And so people
that's
are
just
like
creepy. That's not like
it is kind of creepy, but the article is like exposing it. Yeah. But then it's funny because then the same articles will come around the other way and talk about like Madonna dating like 18-year-old boys. Oh,
you
queen.
Go, girl. Yeah, queen.
Such a queen. And it's just like, okay.
That's what I say every morning in the mirror when I shave. Queen, you get it.
Now, Steve and I, before we started recording, we watched a trailer. And for those of you who don't follow our Facebook page, follow it. Because I posted earlier this week a highly suggested movie on, I believe it was Amazon Video. If you have Amazon Prime, you can get on the app and watch movies, TV shows, whatever. And it was a movie called Drag Kids. So for those of you who you all should know what a drag queen is, but a drag kid is obviously the kid version of a drag queen.
Right.
Now, when it comes to like, I don't know, like gay marriage, it's one of those things where nobody's being hurt. Two consenting adults doing something that they want to do, and there's no harm. Now that has nothing to do with this. Okay, so because the reason I point that out is because a lot of listeners will be like, "Oh, you're just attacking the LGBT, XYZ." Yeah, it's like no. This is like the Brave New World,
that's why I brought that
indoctrinating these children to be sexual. Yeah. And now, for those of you who haven't seen the trailer, in the trailer, Steve pointed out there's a dude's butt.
Yeah, so
blurred out in the movie.
One of the drag kids, of course, they're interviewing him, and he said, like, I'm going to paraphrase, but it says something to the tune of, there's people out there saying that we're being overly sexual. And I swear to God, as the kid says, we're being overly sexualized. They have like some B-roll footage in the background going on. And there's a dude with like see-through underwear and they have his butt blurred out.
Yeah, this dude's easily 35.
So the kid wearing like fishnet stockings all over his entire body and like a wig and all the makeup.
And the dude behind him's naked.
That's not, with the naked dude in the room, that's not being sexualized. But we got to blur out the dude's butt. Because it's sexualized.
Right.
Which is it?
Right.
It's incredible. And then another thing I saw, there was a video, and I don't know how true this one was, but I wouldn't doubt it. I almost am apprehensive to bring it up because, again, you know how things are on the internet. Yeah. There was this toy. It was like the Trolls movie, and they have like a button around where it's like its genitals would be if it was a human. And if you push the button, they like giggle and stuff. Was that, whatever that was, if it was even real. But the fact that, like, something, like, I wouldn't be surprised, I guess.
It made moaning sounds when you press the button. And the thing is the button was not on the packaging. Because, the original button, what was it, on its stomach or something? That was advertised on the packaging as press this button, and it says whatever.
Now, was that a manufacturing mess up? Was, like, lot 372 messed up? Unlikely. But I'm sure that's what the company will say if it's made out to be a thing. Yeah. But the fact that like our children. I mean, you look. I was listening to Joe Rogan the other day, and he had. I think he had Ben Shapiro on. So God help us all.
I listened to that one. Yeah.
He was showing. He didn't show it on the camera, but I knew what he was saying. He said, "Here's a picture of my daughter. How old is she?" And he's like, "I don't know. She looks like she's 20." And his daughter's like 9 or so. I don't know. She's a kid, right?
Yeah.
And it's like girls nowadays look, and I mean really boys do too, the way they're dressed and everything. It goes both ways, but it's mostly with females. Where you see like a girl who, there's like a meme I saw, it was hilarious. Me growing up in the 90s. This is it says like 13-year-olds now, and she has like the princess hair, and she's all dolled up, and it wasn't like an inappropriate picture, but she would like
got
look
like the Tamagotchi.
No. This is 13-year-olds now, like 2020, and she had like. She's all dolled up with makeup, and she was like, Instagram model filter, all this stuff. And this is me when I'm 13. She has like a bowl cut and like a Tamagotchi, like you said.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, it's like the oh my god, Goosebumps books picture girl.
Right.
It's like, that's what we all looked like when I was that age. And no one looked like they do now. And I'm not saying like little girls shouldn't be able to put makeup on. That's stupid. No one's saying that. But the point is for children in general, not just girls. I don't want anyone to think that.
Well, the drag kids were boys.
Right, exactly. I don't want. My thing is, I don't want anyone to think that I am,
picking on girls.
I'm not saying like the girls with their bra straps on in high school. They need to be. I see that kind of stuff all the time. Once you get to like 16 plus or whatever, they're gonna do what they're gonna do. Right, I get it. But I'm saying like this, the generalized. Overexposure and over-sexualization of children is an endemic problem, or is I think I used the word endemic wrong. Is a big problem in our modern progressive quote unquote society. You don't see that stuff in Fountain County, Indiana.
No,
it's
getting there though.
But I know, man. You see like the pageants and stuff.
Yeah,
and I'm like, I thought the whole like fourth wave feminist movement is like. Why are you trying to be pretty for these men? Burn your bras, all that stuff. Like which is it? Are we doing this or are we doing that? I mean, and the girls enjoy that stuff too. Like the girls I know that have done it. I have like nieces, the pageant stuff. Yeah. It's sort of like I'm not saying like the county fair they got Miss 4th of July. I'm not talking about that. Which by the way, in our area they still do stuff like that. I don't know if they do that around the country anymore. But I swear some of the things that happen around here are like out of. Like dollar store books about going to see Nana in the country for a summer. Now it changed your life, like that Secondhand Lines movie.
Oh yeah,
Haley Joel Osment. Like, no, we live there. Like that movie was really a big hit around here because it was like a documentary. It wasn't really a movie, but just the way that children are handled. Not handled. It's disgusting. It's
there's too much tolerance for it.
Yes, that's it. That's what I'm trying to say. Thank you.
And I hate to do the right versus left thing again because I already kind of touched on it already.
Well, we've been really mean to Republicans, so maybe it's time to beat up on the left a little bit.
The left, like a lot of buddies of mine who are left, they'll be like, "Well, we don't really support that." So right, but you're letting it happen,
right? Yeah,
which is just as bad.
So the flip side of that, the right quote unquote side of that is if a pastor or a priest molests a kid. So if my pastor. My pastor's a great guy. I'm not saying he would ever do this in a million years. It's just as an example. If my pastor, like, molested one of my children, there's a high likelihood I would just kill him.
Right.
Like
there is
or if a
zero tolerance policy within our own.
within my belief system. Again, I'm not. My pastor is a great dude. Not in a million years would I think he'd do that. But just the fact that children being abused like that is tolerated is. It's just insane. It's just crazy to me that like I don't know. I guess it's the fact that it's tolerated with certain things. Like I guarantee you, and we had to kind of talk off air about things, but I guarantee you, those of you listening, that you have somebody in your family, maybe not like your first cousin's level, but like someone that has done something that would at the very least border on like a sexual assault, like pedophile type thing. I've heard a lot of stories of people, especially when they're younger, like looking at their sister for too long or something of that nature. And I think part of the fix for that is we need to be able to talk about things like that. Now, if an adult does something, as far as, molest a kid or something, I have a pretty straightforward way I think about that.
Right.
As I mentioned, if I caught someone molesting one of my children, I would pull the gun off my hip and shoot them in the head.
Yep.
And I would do it when I went to court over it. I would have a smile on my face. But I do think that there are people that I guess my question to the world would be why does this happen in the first place? And you can't just say, well, they're just wrong. They're just messed up people. Like, they are messed up people.
This drag kid stuff doesn't help.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So it's accepting now as adults this behavior, and the reason this behavior exists. I'm not solving all the world's problems, but I think part of the reason this behavior exists is because there's two sides of this coin. Is people aren't willing to talk about sexuality and the talk with their kids. And then there's people who talk too much about it. I think the drag kid thing comes from over-sexualization. And I think the priest molesting children comes from let's not talk about it at all. I've got 4 boys. I got 4 boys that, my older 2 started asking questions about things. And they didn't really ask them to me so much. They kind of would say things or so one of the perfect examples, we were watching Wonder Woman and the scene, my thing's falling down. The scene where they're at the party and she has the sword in the back of her dress. Yeah. And she's looking pretty good. Gal Gadot is a good looking lady, right? There's no argument with that. And of course, I'm staring up at her hey, she's pretty good looking. I'm sitting with my wife, and then my wife elbows me, and I'm thinking, classic. Oh, she caught me. And I look over at her, and she points over at the boys, and 3 of my boys are all sitting on the couch, mouths agape, oh, I was like, oh, okay, yeah. Hey, look at them boys staring at her. I got away clean on that one. But as time went on, my oldest son started at first, obviously, and he started saying things and asking things. And my theory, and this might be wrong, if someone's got a doctorate in raising kids, if that exists, can tell me if I'm wrong. But my son started asking me stuff, basically where do babies come from, how are babies made. So I gave him a very basic biological version of the talk, right? The birds and the bees. We talked about sex. It's not a bad word. Actually, one of the things I've had him do was I was like, do you have any questions for me? When I got done telling him, explaining how all that worked. And he's like, well, when do people do that? I'm like, do what? And he, do the thing you're talking about. I'm like, what thing? And he wouldn't say sex. He wouldn't say it. And I said, so
you wouldn't stop until.
Yeah, well, no, I was kind of trying to pull it out of him, and I'm like, you mean sex? He's like, yeah. And I was like, Isaac, I want you to say it. It's not a bad word.
Right.
It's not a cuss word. And he said sex. I was like, it's not a bad word. Now, you shouldn't go talking about this to your friends at school. He's going to. He's going to be 10 soon. I'm sure if it's not happening already.
Guess what my dad told me.
Yeah, I'm sure. But, and then shortly after, probably a year later, my second boy started the same thing. He'll be 8. And I think part of that might have been from my oldest son, maybe mentioning things or whatever. But I had to have the talk with him too. But, me as a dad, it's my responsibility to teach my kids about life. And that's part of life. Sex is not a bad word. And I think too many people, again, I'm going to beat up on the right a little bit. We've been pretty mean to the left today. They're not comfortable talking about real life issues. They want to say the liberals this, liberals that. They want to point at the extremes, which would be the drag kids, right? It's too easy to point at that and be like, maybe not, But at the same time, we have to be willing to have the conversations, the hard conversations in life. So I feel like that kind of covers all that stuff. So
here's another hard thing in life.
Yeah, yeah.
And it is Biden's assault weapon ban. I don't know what you want to call it. A proposal. This
is the new one, right?
This is something that he just came out on social media the other day, and he posted this image, and it was ban assault weapons. So, and he said in this post, quote, "When I was a senator, I secured a 10-year ban on assault weapons, and as president, I'll ban these weapons again."
Which is accurate.
Okay. So the ban he is referring to is called the Public Safety and Recreational Firearms Use Protection Act. Yeah. It's a mouthful. This was fused with the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act that was voted and passed by Congress and signed by Bill Clinton in 1994. So the official summary that was enacted is as follows. Public Safety and Recreational Firearms Use Protection Act amends the Federal Criminal Code to prohibit the manufacture, transfer, or possession of a semi-automatic assault weapon.
Assault weapon.
SAW for short, as defined or listed under this act. Sets penalties for violations and for use or possession of such a weapon during a crime of violence or drug trafficking crime. Requires a serial number of any such weapon manufactured after enactment of this act to clearly show the date on which the weapon was manufactured. So if you read the whole thing, it also talks about like possession of large capacity magazines, although you could own them if they were made before the ban.
Right, they had a grandfather part, essentially.
Yeah, but if you read it, the magazines are supposedly treated like firearms themselves. Like it's just people who just have no idea what they're doing or what they're writing about.
They're going to serialize every magazine?
Yeah. So now here's a little known fact for our lifetime Republican listeners. In May of 1994, right around this time where this was all being thrown together, former presidents Gerald Ford and Ronald Reagan, with Jimmy Carter, wrote to the U.S. House of Representatives in support of banning semi-automatic assault guns. Assault guns. So
I wish I had an assault gun because I call an assault gun as like a 105 millimeter howitzer.
And
I would love to have an assault gun.
I didn't know he did that. I didn't know he...
Who, Reagan?
Yeah, I didn't know he wrote to Congress saying, yeah, we need to ban those scary
from
guns.
California, what do you expect?
Right. And, it's just funny because people point to Reagan, because the economy was good under him and whatever.
It's almost like
and he was like,
now.
dang you hippies type of president. People just love that.
I smell hippies.
Which is great. But just so out of touch, man. Like,
yeah, I think that's all it is. I think it's in his case, and I don't want to come off
voters
as like,
are out of touch for just.
I don't want to come off as like a Reagan apologist, necessarily. But I think for him and for a lot of politicians is they don't live in an area or an environment that is very gun heavy, I guess is the word I would use. Like we live,
Also, this is 1994, so he would have just got done being president when, less than 10 years before.
Right, and he's still pretty prominent in the public eye.
So basically, he would have Secret Service still.
Yeah,
he's still being protected.
Right.
To some extent.
By guns, ironically. Why does no one ever see the irony in that? Like the pro-gun control people. They never see the irony in the fact that these politicians are protected by guns. And I think there's an aspect where they think like, oh, random hillbilly du jour, you're going to go shoot up the active shooter? It's like, well, it's happened. It happens a lot.
Right.
Or like where someone just displays a weapon as an act of self-defense and it works,
Right.
But I had a conversation with a guy from New York. I believe he lived in like the city. Yeah, I don't know what like burg he lived in, Brooklyn or whatever. But he made the comment. We were talking about gun control, and obviously a lot of us were from Indiana, so we're very used to being around guns and firearms and just part of our lives. Hunting, target shooting. I think 90% of the gun use that you and I refer to is in hunting, target shooting, and things of that nature. But we also understand that there is a self-defense piece. It's very important. It's just, thank God, not utilized that often.
You want to know something I find ironic, and I'm super opinionated when I say this, and I'm probably going to ruffle some feathers, but there's this meme floating around, and it's the largest army in the world is America's hunters, and if you tallied all the hunting licenses, it'd be like the biggest army ever, and it's just like, well, I think a lot of people have this mental image that they're going to take on the government or whoever with a 12 gauge. And I just don't understand the thought process behind that. I don't understand. I'm not saying that it can't happen, but like all these weapons they're going hunting with, I don't know. It just doesn't.
Right.
It doesn't make sense to me.
You mean like just for like those on the right who are pro-gun?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like that's more of like
that's why
lack
this
of
assault weapon ban is so bad though.
Right.
Because you can't fight. You're not saying. I'm not going to say you can't, but you can't effectively fight.
Yeah.
Bad people
with
a muzzle loader.
Yeah.
You just can't.
Yeah.
or a bow and arrow.
I mean, you can kill people with those things, but it's
you're
not
going to get killed.
Yeah, you might take out like their first guy in an ambush situation, but
done
they're going to
after that.
smoke you real quick, because they guess what they have, quote unquote large capacity magazines and quote unquote assault weapons.
Right.
Yeah.
That's why I wanted to bring that up, though. And I know everybody already knows that that's here and it's happening, and people are in denial.
Yeah.
And people are trying to.
Where are we still at war? What country? Where did you come back from?
Afghanistan.
Afghanistan. What are they fighting us with?
Oh, well, some AKs.
AK-47s and like they do have like machine guns and stuff, but they get them
from us.
or from like the Chinese probably.
Yeah.
But for the most part, the average Afghani has a 30-round magazine,
right,
with a 7.60 by 39 assault rifle,
and that's why they're able to fight us off so effectively.
Yeah.
If they had muzzle loaders or 12 gauges, it would be just.
I think there's one more aspect that's not communicated by the pro-gun side very well. Is we want to maintain possession of semi-automatic, AR-15s or whatever your semi-automatic rifle is. Like, I think it should be very easy to own a fully automatic weapon.
Yes.
That's my personal opinion. And the reason isn't because I want to go to war with the government, but it keeps the government in check. Because if our federal government understands that they can't just run rampantly over the American people in a totalitarian...
You mean like putting people in vans?
Right. Do they do that at pro-gun rallies? No, they don't. They wouldn't try it. They're not stupid, because the guys are doing the arrest are still people, which
right.
we talked about a couple weeks ago.
The listeners are probably like, well, they're not destroying, defacing property, which
that's
I get
true.
that.
Yeah,
but
that's another aspect of it.
If they did,
yeah,
their tactics would
completely change
completely.
Yeah. There would be like open fire in the streets, like weapons, like gunfire.
Boston Massacre style.
Right. Yeah, I mean that's what happens, but the reason they don't, the Bundy, the whole out in like Montana with the cows and all that stuff. The reason the police didn't just like go after everybody like they do, like they did in Minnesota, where they had like the guys going down the street shooting people with pepper balls, is because they were facing an armed opposition.
A good one, not just not just like a stupid little hillbilly
army.
It was like a legit there was like this network of people that showed up, essentially, is what happened. And one of the most famous pictures was a dude, he's like in the prone position with his AK. I think it was an AK.
Like on a bridge?
On the bridge,
overlook.
yeah. So that guy is running for office right now.
Really?
Yeah, I forget where and how and
probably
why.
Local state legislator.
Yeah, he's actually running for some government.
Good for
something.
him.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's awesome. I like that, hearing that kind of stuff.
But
those guys were... you would see their interactions, and they were protesting and doing all the chanting and everything too.
Right.
But when they would interact with the police, they were respectful. But guess who else was respectful in that interaction?
Who?
The police. Why?
Why? An armed society.
Because they're staring down a barrel of a gun.
Right. Well, an armed society is a respectful...
polite society. And that's a very true statement. Whenever you go into a gun store, I'm strapped. The guy behind the counter is strapped. It's one of the most polite conversations that you're going to have. And granted, the guy might, I may make fun of him for carrying a 1911. Come on,
absolutely.
Boomer. 2 World Wars. But usually they don't do that, by the way. The guys who own the gun stores they're smarter than that, let's be honest. I love 1911s.
But then they do the whole Trump 1911
gold-plated.
It's just the worst.
I do love the pictures that there's some artists who did the pictures of I think Ronald Reagan was riding a Velociraptor with an RPG on his back.
I saw that.
Those are the best. I love them. So they're just the most ridiculous thing ever.
They had one.
They have Trump on a tank.
They have Trump on a tank. Then they have one with Bill Clinton and his zippers unzipped.
Oh really?
They have Monica by his leg.
That's awesome.
So now you brought up the Bundy thing, and so I just pulled it up because a lot of people may not know what you're talking about. And so,
I hope not. That was a big deal.
It was a big deal
for the Second Amendment.
Let me just read off this paraphrase summary. So, the 2014 Bundy standoff was an armed confrontation between supporters of cattle rancher, I'm going to butcher this guy's name, Cliven Bundy, and law enforcement following a 21-year legal dispute in which the United States Bureau of Land Management obtained court orders directing Bundy to pay over $1 million in withheld grazing fees for Bundy's use of federally owned land adjacent to Bundy's ranch. This was in Nevada. Okay, so when the federal government tried to confiscate the Bundy cattle as repayment for the alleged debt, the militia, the people that I talked about, showed up and stood with the ranchers and caused the government to back down without a shot fired, which is good.
Yep, absolutely.
You know, because
that's not totally true. They did kill one of the guys.
Did they really?
Yeah. So this was it was kind of a separate event. Do you remember when they took over that building? There was like a state park or a federal park, and there was like a building that those militia members like took over.
Really?
It was almost a separate event, but it was all tied together. And there was a point where I think he was like a family friend. I can't remember his name to save my life right now. But they were driving to go see the county sheriff, you know, the duly elected sheriff of that county. And they were ambushed by FBI agents on the way there.
Really?
And they like spike stripped him or ran him off the road one way or the other. And the guy gets out, and there's footage you can see. I think they had a helicopter overhead. Wow. And there's actually footage from inside the vehicle. There was like little kids in this vehicle. There was like one grown man, a woman, and I think one or two little kids, little girls. I think it was one little girl maybe. And for some reason, the guy who ends up getting killed, he's an older guy, he gets out of the vehicle. I don't know why he would do that, but he did get out, and he's like, "What are you going to do, shoot me?" And they shot him with something. Now, I think the official report was they shot him with a non-lethal, but then they hit him like right here. And from the overhead video, you can kind of see him do this, like reach down for his belly essentially. Yeah. And then you see him get lit up. Of course, their justification was he reached for a weapon, which he had. He did have a weapon on him. He absolutely did. But when they shot him with, you know, maybe a rubber bullet, or if it may have been a real bullet, I don't know. Yeah, I don't really trust him, to be honest. But he reaches down like this.
Because they hit him on the side.
Yeah, ow, I got hit, which was what anyone would do.
Yeah.
And they light him up, kill him right there.
Wow.
And then on top of that, they were shooting out the windows in the vehicle with this little kid, and the woman and the guy. I think the guy was one of the sons of the Cliven Bundy guy. He I know he was a Bundy, maybe a cousin or a son, or he was somebody.
Right.
But they were going to see the sheriff because I think they attempted to pull them over. And they fled. They had like an argument with the officers that were trying to pull them over, and they fled. And then they, you know, chased them, and they had an ambush. They had an ambush set up for them. So, you know, that kind of goes to show you how they thought that was going to go.
Wow. Did you hear about the Ryan Whitaker situation?
The name rings a huge bell.
Okay, so I hate to keep the show going, but I just have to bring this up because, you know, we're talking about like bad policing now. Right. You know, so I just got to bring the story up just to give it the recognition it deserves. So Ryan Whitaker, he was shot and killed by the police May 21st in Arizona. And, you know, like you...
Was he the guy in the hotel?
No, I don't think it was a hotel.
No, that was a different guy.
But anyways, so May 21st, so this was a while ago, and they're just now looking into it because the footage came out of the whole situation. Okay, so a neighbor called the police about a noise complaint. The neighbor was just answering the questions of the dispatcher fast because he was so annoyed and wanted to deal with it. So, you know, the 911 call said that it could be physical. He didn't know what was going on because of noise, whatever. So anyways, turns out that Ryan and his lady were just making salsa and playing Crash Bandicoot. So so there was just it's video games. And so the cops show up.
Was the noise the game, supposedly?
It was just a fun night. Okay, is what it sounds like.
They're just having a good time.
Okay, so the cops show up and knock on the door. They announce themselves, but it's late at night. Mm-hmm. Okay, so for obvious reasons, he grabbed his gun. Mm-hmm. I guess opened the door, or they announced themselves, but it was obvious that they were cops, and it wasn't obvious. Nothing was apparent, right? Mm-hmm. So they opened the door. One of the cops yelled "hands," and as Ryan is getting onto his knees, the officer shoots him twice in the back.
In the back. Yes, clearly a threat.
And so I guess while he was being shot before he was being shot in the back, he dropped his gun anyway, so he didn't have the means to really kill him with a deadly weapon. So anyways, body cam footage was released almost 2 months after that, so now we're talking about this guy, Ryan Whitaker.
No, I'm talking about Daniel Shaver, who's the guy I was talking about. He was the guy killed in the hotel.
Right. Yeah, I just wanted to bring up Ryan Whitaker.
This is a recent one.
Yeah.
I hadn't heard about this one.
Yep.
Wow, that's awful.
Yeah. Listeners out there, look up,
That's so sad.
Ryan Whitaker.
Yeah. Now that does part of the armed society thing is there is a risk. Okay?
There is a risk.
Unfortunately, part of that risk in recent days is death by law enforcement, and I think a lot of cases it's just poor training.
Poor training.
Yeah. And one of the things, I hate to reference Joe Rogan again, But he
that was a good episode. I know
he had Jocko Willink on there.
Yep.
And they said that 20%. Jocko said 20% of law enforcement's time should be in training. Now I know with budgets and all this other, all the things they've got to do. They've already got to attend. I totally agree. If you're going to be interacting with the public in that capacity that frequently, there needs to be more training. And defunding them is not the answer.
I say we do a whole episode on that next week.
We should, yeah. I should be here. So unless my anniversary is Friday, 10 years, y'all. I made it. But
congrats.
Does that mean I can divorce now? Is that cool? Is that how it works? Is it just done?
The trial period. Well, that's all I have for this episode.
Yeah. I think we covered some heavy stuff, but I think some important things.
Yeah. So we'll see you guys next week, and I say we hit on the.
Let's do it. Let's actually focus on the Second Amendment for once. We get on everything else that we got through time.
All right, guys. We'll see you next week.